Meditators, today you will benefit from a breakdown of exactly how anyone can earn high yields in DeFi. One of the best explanations I have ever heard for where these yields come from and how you can position yourself for the future of DeFi. Sharing his knowledge with us today is Psykeeper. He is currently building the DeFi platform Saffron Finance and has been building in the space for the last 10 years. It was awesome to speak to someone who has been developing in the crypto space for such a long time. He managed to explain complicated concepts in a way that anyone can understand and has made me even more excited about the future of DeFi. He gave a very balanced argument explaining not only the reward of DeFi, but also the associated risks. To help me get excited for my own future, remember to like and subscribe below. To stay one with the crypto markets, sign up and get 6 free market meditations newsletters a week. You'll find a link in the description below. I am your host, 𝐏𝐨𝐬𝐬𝐿, and this is the Market Meditations podcast. We chat with fascinating people from around the world to figure out how they've built wealth. Meditators, welcome to another episode of the Market Meditations podcast. Today we have with us a really special guest, different to anything we've had before. He's come on with a robot voice and no face or image, which is because he values being Anon, something that's huge in this space, and I'd love to dive into why. He's also got an extremely large amount of knowledge on DeFi, on yield farming. Obviously, he has Saffron Finance, which we're going to talk a lot about. Sai, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you on. Can we start with a little bit of background about you, about why you're Anon right now, and how you got into the space?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is extensive in this space. I have been working on different projects derived from Bitcoin, derived from Litecoin, ETH-based projects, off-chain type of projects that are blockchain-based, but not on-chain, on a decentralized network, for about 10 years now. And I gained interest in this space when I was looking at alternative currencies, and I had been introduced to Bitcoin by a friend who actually printed out the Satoshi white paper and shared it with me in person. Since that time, I got into mining, and then I forgot about it, and then I saw it on the internet. There was a website where you could buy some templates for websites, and I saw that they were accepting Bitcoin, and this was in about 2012. And ever since then, I just rediscovered it, and I said, wow, I can't believe this crazy idea that I had read about years ago is actually being used and is being worked on still. And I got really interested in seeing if mining was still available, and it was. I ended up setting up some GPU miners for altcoins later in that year, and ended up actually quitting my full-time job and working full-time on cryptocurrency related projects for the foreseeable future until now. So it's been quite some time, just about 9 or 10 years since that started.
Wow, so you've been in this space a long time, almost to the point where I go and assume money must no longer be any sort of motivator for you to stay in this space.
I think most people that are still working on crypto projects have some drive to change the way that things are organized. And for decentralized finance, it is a new way to think about how finance institutions and the way that we interact with each other in the language of money can be changed. And you asked earlier about how I got into the space and got into creating Saffron. And the reason is because if you think about Ethereum and the blockchain space, even a year and a half ago, Aave didn't exist, Compound didn't exist, Yearn didn't exist, Uniswap barely existed as of V1. And now we have Uniswap v3 as of today. So things are increasing rapidly in terms of technology and what we can do with decentralized finance. And early in the summer last year, I became interested in it, started researching it. And then by the time November 1st rolled around, we were able to launch Saffron v1 on that day. So yeah, it's been about 4 or 5 months since we launched the first version of Saffron, and we're working hard on v2 as well.
Can you tell us a little bit about what Saffron actually does for those who don't know?
Absolutely. So in the DeFi space right now, you can earn interest on stablecoin deposits or on any coin deposits by lending it to people who are borrowing on the network. So borrowers pay a fee, and lenders supply currency. And this is the basic of all, it's the basic building block of all lending on DeFi right now. So the way that I looked at it was, well, if you're lending or borrowing, you're basically taking risk or not taking risk by participating or not participating. And in the traditional finance world, people take risk, but they take variable risk depending on some sort of risk profile that they choose. So it's not that they're participating in finance or not participating in finance. They usually go into a, let's say, a high risk loan situation, or they go into a low risk loan situation, and then they get a return based on the risk that they take. And DeFi is so young that there aren't a lot of options to modify your risk in a customized way or to get that granular risk tolerance. So Saffron gives you a way to get higher or lower risk based on lending to Compound or lending to Rari Capital or lending to any other DeFi protocol or interacting with any DeFi protocol in any way. We've started with lending because it's the easiest to understand and it was the quickest to build at first. But essentially, Saffron is a risk readjustment layer that lets you choose your return profile based on the risk that you're willing to take.
Do you believe that risk and reward are correlated right now in DeFi, or is the market so immature that they're not actually correlated and it's a little bit randomly assigned because people don't really understand the projects they're using?
I think in aggregate, risk is correlated with return. I think that it is just a natural thing that exists as part of information science, where things that are completely information asymmetric, which means there's a lot of information that's held by very few people, those things are very risky. Whereas things that where everyone is aware of it and everyone sees how it works, those things tend to be less risky. And I think just in general, DeFi right now is in such an early phase that pretty much everyone is an early adopter. And early adopters are, by definition, high risk takers, right? And early adopters, by definition, will almost always get higher returns or lose everything. So Saffron is the protocol to kind of stabilize that risk and return profile to make you a little bit less exposed to the risks that are inherent in this new nascent field of DeFi, but maybe giving you less of a return, or you could take a higher risk and get a higher return.
So when you're adjusting that risk from low to high, what parameters are changing?
In our protocol right now in Saffron, we have insurance provided to lenders, which means if you're lending to Compound and there is a bug, or there is some sort of price fluctuation due to the nature of the stablecoin being an algorithmic peg or something like that, then you will get downside protection from the lenders that are taking higher risk. So in essence, Saffron is a peer-to-peer insurance company. We're expanding to different types of versions of pools where it's going to be like a peer-to-peer market-based risk product, or it'll be, let's say, you'll take baskets of risky assets that are determined by a DAO or a community, and then baskets of less risky assets that are just determined by the DAO or community. But right now, we're taking this insurance angle and we're taking an insurance approach where if there is some sort of bug, you get covered on the downside of having a bug and losing all your money. And the way that that works is SFI holders put their SFI into the staking pool, and that SFI is transferred to the low risk users. And if there is a bug, that SFI gets released as a protection against the downside of losing all your money in the bug or losing all your money in a smart contract error.
It's so incredible to see the creativity that's coming out of the space in replicating CeFi in DeFi right now. The insurance part of it fascinates me. I know it's a very difficult one to execute, where, like you said, borrowing and lending is a lot more simple. How far away do you think we are from having, say, complex insurance structures in place through DeFi? Or can it even be done purely through DeFi?
I think it can be done. I think that we're pretty far away from that right now. A lot of insurance on chain is mostly determined by a DAO, and then you are kind of depending on that DAO to verify that the insurance coverable event happened as they say it did. And I think that there is some area where this could be exploited in terms of fraud or in terms of like just they get it wrong, and then there is some people who benefit and some who don't based on like an incorrect decision. And I think that we can improve on that by getting larger institutions and larger actuarial data sets into the DeFi landscape maybe by using scaling solutions, or maybe by using something that's outside of like the graphing calculator of the blockchain, sort of like the graph, or maybe a layer two that's um, kind of focused towards insurance, which is the thing that we've been thinking about as well. Um, I think that this will be solved by technology. In my opinion, DeFi is going to replace a lot of the way that we do business in the traditional world, and it'll be done with a technology that we can write on-chain contracts for, and it'll replace a lot of the middlemen and a lot of the unnecessary overhead that the traditional finance world has.
I mean, that's what excites me about the space. Just being able to push and be a part of this infrastructure shift that just makes the world far more efficient, frees up a whole bunch of human resources and capital to do way more productive stuff, hopefully, unless they get inefficiently allocated somewhere we don't want them to go. In terms of time frame, you said we're very, very early. And normally that makes me think that we're seeing that parabolic rise right now. And in terms of valuations and money flowing into the system, we're probably going to see some sort of crash and then slow building into the next run up. Do you think that's what's going to happen right now? Do you think that's what the cycle's looking like? Obviously, there are no absolute predictions, but it'd be very interesting to hear your insight as someone who's been around for a long time and seen crypto cycles and potentially can carry over some of that to the DeFi.
Yes, I think that if you look at what happened in 2017 and early 2018, there was this extreme run up of Bitcoin and all these altcoins. And then it was a slow decline. Bitcoin probably lost its value $500 a day for a month and a half. And it was just a painful time in the industry. And people seem to not remember that that had actually happened. And probably didn't predict that the bear market would last for so long. Right now, we're in this different time, let's say, where everything is going up in price, and we have like a sustained Bitcoin price, which is much higher than we've ever seen before, and it seems to be lasting forever. But the market always works in cycles, or almost always works in cycles. So I think you're right that eventually things will get re-rated. But I also think that if DeFi can deliver the promises of replacing some financial institutions or some financial language that we speak to each other, then it's going to be valued higher based on the replacements that it can make traditional finance. Why would I put my money in a bank if I can put my money into USDC and make 6% APY? It just makes no sense, right? So if we can continue offering these rates, and there's actual business and lending happening on chain where people can truly make these APYs without having like a reward structure or without having like a customer acquisition structure, then we can definitely see this continue to gain value as people are replacing their normal savings accounts with, let's say, a DeFi savings account or a DeFi lending account that they gain a higher APY instead of parking the money in a bank.
And I want to follow up with one last question on this point before moving on to something for the people who are less familiar with DeFi. Do you think DeFi, there's a scenario where DeFi doesn't actually present that solutions that are that much better? For example, there are actual companies behind these protocols that are being made, and the platform's only as good as people can see. So if something is not actually very fair and heavily weighted towards a certain party for whatever reason behind the underlying code, but it's presented as really good, the transparency alone only works if people understand what's going on. If people don't, could we just see a whole range of new companies come up that aren't actually that much better than the centralized system we currently have?
Yeah, and that did happen in 2017. I believe a lot of ICO projects and blockchain-based projects that had a very high degree of transparency, but just the wrong idea, gained and then lost a lot of value quickly. And I think on a long timeline, which is kind of the timeline that we're targeting with Saffron, we're trying to be around for a long time and integrate with as many protocols as possible. We'll be able to see which ones work out and which don't. So we're starting to see a lot of different stablecoin concepts come up, and actually even DAI itself has changed so much since I've been interested in it and introduced to it. So if we take a look at the history and what has happened already on chain, and then kind of project that into the future, we'll see a lot of ideas and things just come and go. I think as an industry, we have to try different things out. There's nothing wrong with giving it a shot as long as the code works and is fair for everyone and doesn't have an exploit or some sort of rug pull underneath it, then why not give it a shot and see if it works? I think that people will determine whether or not they can spend a certain amount of or allocate a certain amount of resources towards an idea, and the market will decide what works and what doesn't work in the end. From Saffron's perspective, we are trying to integrate with as many protocols as possible. So let's say lending and borrowing isn't the end all be all of DeFi. That's not what gets replaced. Maybe it'll be something else. Maybe AMMs, DEX trading is going to take over centralized exchange trading, and we'll be positioned to mitigate downside risk on AMMs as well. So I think that for Saffron's perspective, we can kind of pick and choose who we integrate with, and then kind of try to expand this risk mitigation and risk readjustment to all of DeFi, and we'll see where it goes.
I was about to follow up with a question asking you how you're positioning yourself to be around for the long term and not look for a short-term money grab. And you answered it pretty perfectly over there by iterating, reacting to the market, and positioning the whole business model in a way which you can instantly pivot to whatever new things come up in DeFi and whatever the market deems as this is what we want to use in DeFi. So as an entrepreneur, I absolutely love that. And I double down on your point that it's really good to see new ideas come up and be tried. I think the issue comes in the current market conditions where projects are valued based on ideas where execution is almost assumed. But in reality, like even the best of ideas can't be done without a very capable team, and most companies do fail after 3 years, so capable teams aren't that plentiful.
That's absolutely correct. Our team at Saffron has been working together for over 5 years on different blockchain projects. In fact, a lot of the engineers and team members that are working on Saffron right now have either left their full-time jobs or were available to work on Saffron at the time that we started. And they've been employed by Saffron and the DAO through the Treasury, which is a decentralized entity. We hope to continue hiring, and we are actually hiring ancillary engineers as well. And we would like to continue working, building the team in a way that they get paid by the DAO, and the actual Saffron Treasury will replenish itself by taking fees on the system. And engineers and project managers, promoters, content creators can contribute towards Saffron and be given a percentage of the treasury per quarter based on a governance vote. So we think of it as a fully autonomous protocol for risk readjustment that employs people in a DAO structure. And I think that this paradigm, this new idea of having a decentralized autonomous corporation is something that is inherently valuable and is something that we're building towards every day.
That idea excites me. That is literally the reason I am in this space. I love that you guys are building towards that. I imagine it's not fully pulled off yet, but it sounds like you're very, very close. And if it's not done now, it'll be done very soon. Amazing to see what you're doing over at Saffron Finance, which anyone listening to this should definitely check out. But say they're a beginner. Like I'm a complete beginner right now listening to this. I've heard stories about the amazing yields I can get on different DeFi protocols. Where should I start? Should I just take a bit of money and try it out? Is there a specific platform or website you recommend I go to?
That's a great question. Right now, I think someone who's getting started, it would be hard for them to get interested in Ethereum because the gas fees are so high. I would say watch for something to happen where either Ethereum layer 2 gets announced or there's an update to Ethereum where gas fees get lower. Right now, it looks like chains like Phantom and chains like Binance Smart Chain, even Avalanche, are becoming more popular due to the low fee and their introduction into DeFi. So actually, if you're interested in learning about DeFi and seeing if you can invest in it or seeing if you can understand how these new concepts apply to finance and how that applies to your life, look at what the new platforms are doing and look at how much it actually costs to transact on those platforms and see the return rate that others are getting. And maybe look at exactly how those returns are being generated. If they're being generated by rewards or if they're being generated by actual economic activity, it's good to look into that. So yeah, I would say look at some of the new things that are coming out that are solving some of the problems that DeFi has right now, which is high transaction fees, and just kind of hard to understand where that money is coming from. If you do a little bit of research, I would actually suggest our own Saffron Academy, which is coming out with videos, DeFi tutorials, things like that. I actually really like Binance. I think it's called, what is it called?
Binance Academy?
Is it called Binance Academy?
Yeah.
Binance Academy is really good. In fact, if you want to learn about AMMs or impermanent loss or any of these technical concepts that get thrown around a lot, you can probably just Google Binance Academy and then the search term, and you will find a very good explanation of what's going on. Those two resources have been really helpful to understand how to learn about DeFi for a beginner.
Someone asked me earlier today on a podcast, how do you think is the best way for people to get involved in crypto or DeFi if they don't have any sort of edge? And it was from an investing perspective and trading perspective. And I actually responded with, first thing you want to do is study and learn. Are you passionate about this? Do you like this? Because if you don't understand the products you're investing in or using, and you're trying to invest in them, you're not going to have any ability to hold when the markets turn. Your emotions are going to be in complete turmoil because you're solely buying on the reason that number might go up. And with something as early stage and exciting as DeFi, if DeFi is going to become a trend, it's going to be a lot of turbulence and it's going to be a pretty wild ride. So make sure you understand it. Make sure you know why you're using it. The aha hope moment for me was actually using it. I use this and I'm use the bank a few weeks later. Why on earth would I go through that process when I can go through this process? If it's genuinely making my life better and has a tangible use case, which actually is another difference, key one I see between 2017 and now, these products which I'm hyper passionate about and investing in, I'm actually using in my day-to-day life. What use of DeFi do you think we're not thinking about that is going to make our lives way easier and better?
I think that, first of all, risk readjustment from Saffron's perspective, we have a lot of that. I see it as a peer-to-peer risk exchange more than anything. So if you're thinking about, is it risky to put my money into the stock market? Is it risky to buy government bonds? Is it risky to, go to a traditional mutual fund or institution? Those kind of questions are what we're answering. I also think outside of Saffron, we're looking at stuff like synthetic assets, where you have like a pass-through that basically holds the value of the euro or holds the value of, Japanese yen or holds the value of a stock. I think that what we've seen in the past few months is that these institutions that are traditionally providing these services to people are not doing a good job, and they can be replaced by DeFi protocols. And I think they will be very quickly, and it'll happen faster than most people think.
Wow, I'm very curious to see whether that plays out or not, but you're definitely going to have more knowledge than me as to whether or not it will. So it's going to be interesting to see because just experientially and from studying, I always try to overestimate how long I think these things will take, but the amount of money and talent that's pouring into the space, obviously the Saffron team, all sorts of DeFi projects that I've been talking to, it's happening a lot faster than really anything I've ever seen before in the space right now. And specifically with the amount of yield you can get, the crazy rates you can earn right now, which we discussed is correlated to risk. Do you think that just like the banks used to give us lots of interest and now we're not getting lots of interest, DeFi is going to move in a similar direction, or that inefficient middleman, if we take it out very efficiently, it could be a much more profitable system for the users?
It depends on how much real economic activity can be passed through DeFi. So if people are taking out loans and they're borrowing based on these DeFi platforms, then the lenders will make more money than they will anywhere else in the traditional world. But if most of the, let's say, profits or the yield coming from DeFi right now is just being sustained by customer acquisition costs, then it will be a very hard crash. I think that DeFi as an industry needs to attract real economic activity before those customer acquisition rewards run out. Otherwise, we're going to see that crash, like you had said before we return to the mean.
I was actually going to ask, could you explain the customer acquisition rewards for us? Is that what enables us to get such high returns early on when a new project is launched?
Yes, for the most part, uh, exchanges that were launched in 2020, DeFi platforms launching now, they are giving away their tokens to new users to attract them and to gain new users in the industry instead of having the APYs derived from actual economic activity. So, for example, on Saffron, you can see the stablecoin APY, or you can see the enhanced reward APY. So we are giving away rewards as well. A lot of protocols will tell you the APY. Really, that's an APY of combined economic activity plus their reward token. So they're just printing new tokens, or they're making a reward system available for the early days to attract users. And I think this is similar to, let's say, Uber subsidizing a lot of the ride costs in the very early days, and then eventually that went up, right?
Hmm.
So this is a strategy that not necessarily bad, but could backfire if enough economic activity is not given to the chain and not adopted on chain legitimately.
That was very useful. Thank you for explaining that, Sai. I want to completely switch gears for the last segment of the podcast, if that's okay with you, and kind of ask why you're anonymous right now and speaking to us through a voice changer.
I think that philosophically, anonymity is something that should be held in high regard. I think the code for these systems really is valuable because it provides a decentralized and permissionless way to transfer value. And the identity and the background of the users who are creating that code doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the way that the code operates. So, for each protocol and for each product to be evaluated on its merits would be the ideal situation for DeFi. In addition, I think that there are a lot of jurisdictional issues with the DeFi landscape as a whole because there is uncertainty in what the actual permissions are or what the limits are to how far you can go with DeFi. And I think for my own sake, it would be better to remain anonymous for now.
That's fascinating. I actually thought it would be for security reasons because we've had people on the podcast that are terrified that someone is going to come to their house and pull a gun out on them and simply say, "Give me your Bitcoin." And no matter what security they have, say multi-sig or hidden away in a vault somewhere, if whoever's trying to take your Bitcoin doesn't believe you, that puts you in a very precarious situation. But the philosophical aspect is a really cool one. I mean, look at Satoshi and how that worked. Isn't there still the risk that you could always reveal yourself?
Yes, and I think that eventually I may reveal my identity if Saffron becomes big enough, or if it is something that, becomes less of a risk for me. I would be okay with that. But yeah, I think the advantages of anonymity are many. In fact, I've been in many discussions about real life identity projects versus Anon identity projects. I think an Anon identity is much more valuable because of the freedom that you get and because of the respect that you get from other creators in the community to be able to bring something from zero to a very successful project without having to rely on your background or your expertise in the space prior to the project's launch.
As a user or an investor, and I appreciate this is a bit of a tough question, how do I feel safe investing in someone Anon if I have no idea how to vet code?
I think it is the same as Bitcoin. So everyone knows somebody who knows a lot about code or a lot about tech. And I think if you're investing in Bitcoin and you don't understand it, then you're usually relying on a social structure or human capital that you get information from. For example, someone on the news or someone that you know that's a very highly technical person or somebody that you respect and have a confidence that they know what they're talking about when it comes to these technical issues. You can rely on them to give you their opinion, and whether or not you trust them gives you kind of like an idea of whether or not you should put your money towards it or you should be interested in one topic or another. If they think that something is a scam or they think that something is not really reliable, then they'll tell you that with their honest opinion. And I think a lot of decisions that we make relies on this structure of social capital and social credit. So if you don't have the technical capability to read code, then you usually are connected with someone that does. Or you can gain that technical capability if you're really concerned about understanding it yourself and make your own determination, which I think a lot of people have done recently.
A very fair point, and that social capital is what makes me so bullish on Bitcoin, what makes me believe that Bitcoin is the #1 contender to be that global store of value, simply because the brand is so strong, the infrastructure is there, it's recognized around the world, it's on companies' balance sheets, people believe in it now. I mean, the fact that it's on a company's balance sheet matters less that that company validates it, and matters more that people look to that company and see, hey, that if Elon Musk is doing it, maybe I should do it too. What that also does, though, is make it slow down the process of it, doesn't it? Because social capital takes time. Nothing can really replace the time it takes to build that up, especially with the number of hacks and scams that are going on in the space right now. Because it's not only a issue of trust, it's also an issue of, well, similar to trust. It's not trust of malicious behavior, but also trust of capability. So you can't see the people's credentials behind the team, what they've managed to do before, which can slow down the space.
That's correct. And the biggest trade-off of, let's say, an Anon team versus a well-respected or a team with a very long history of success is the initial startup phase. And I think for Saffron, we had a pretty tough time starting because of the anonymity and because we didn't have a chance to prove ourselves beforehand by starting with completely new identities that were completely anon and not related to even any anon identities we had in the past. So from my perspective, it's something that you have to build up much more slowly, which is exactly correct, as you said. But the trade-off in the end is that if you do everything right and your product is actually useful to people and you have something that creates value on chain, then it will be adopted and eventually people will start reading the code. It'll start being vetted by the professionals in the space and they'll give you a good rating if your code is actually good. For example, when we launched the product on November 1st, and on November 15th was when the token started trading, and DEX Tools gave us a 99 out of 100. I didn't even know DEX Tools existed or that they had a rating system. So someone at DEX Tools had done the process of verification and read the code, said it's good, it's working, and since then we've had pretty good reviews. Of course, it can be improved. Actually, just 2 weeks ago, we implemented our multi-sig on-chain to improve security. Things can always be improved. I think the entire space is going through this process of becoming more secure and becoming, I guess it's being criticized or looking at more critically from the perspective of how secure is it and can we trust it?
You have very well thought out answers for every question, which I love because it shows the care and attention you've put into this project and pretty much everything you do, Sai. So it's really refreshing to see. What is your primary motivator right now to build in DeFi?
I think building is fun, and I think you should only do something if it's fun. And I think changing the way that people interact is an opportunity that I have, and it would be really stupid for me not to take it. So that's really a very base level reasoning, but I think that's what motivates me. And I think my team members are also motivated by that same thing. They're able to create a change in the world where, we've been waiting for this opportunity and we saw that Satoshi took that opportunity and took it. And I think that we would like to do a similar thing and like to improve things. And when you look as an engineer at a problem, you always choose the most efficient and most effective way to solve it. And I think when I looked at DeFi early last summer, I thought, wow, there's so much opportunity here. I have to do something. And that's how Saffron came to be.
That's beautiful motivation and reasoning, Sai. I love your passion. I love your energy, and really appreciate what you're doing in the DeFi space. Definitely need to spend a bit more time on Saffron Finance and using that. Thanks a lot for coming on, meditators. That is everything from us. I hope you enjoyed another episode of the Market Meditations podcast. Psykeeper not only provided a huge amount of alpha, sharing his thoughts on the future of DeFi, but also provided genuinely interesting commentary on why decentralized finance is so revolutionary. His comments on risk management and insurance showcases exactly how early we are and how rapidly this space is growing. This pace of growth is exactly why I have my research team write 6 market meditations newsletters a week. To access these, all you have to do is go to 𝐏𝐸𝐺 I hope you enjoyed that deep dive into DeFi. If you still haven't become an active user of DeFi and want even more actionable steps to help you start, check out my episode with DeFi Dad, one of the top educators in the space.